Could Crimea, long touted as an unbreakable fortress, really crumble in one fiery night?
Picture the air thick with the acrid stench of burning fuel, the ground trembling under relentless explosions. Whispers of escape filled the streets as families bundled their scared children into cars. It was October 5, past midnight, when fate shifted. This strike wasn't just chaos, it signaled the end of a fragile illusion. Dawn revealed a peninsula in flames, sirens wailing like mournful cries through the smoky haze. The population stirred, panicking over what to pack.
How could Ukraine orchestrate such precision? Multistage severance, Kiev's spokespeople called it, a scalpel aimed at severing the occupation's lifeline.
Across the Russian line, at least 251 drones and cruise missiles surged as one wave, clawing at energy hubs and logistics veins. Feodosia ignited, its marine oil terminal a blazing vortex, consuming multifunctional units that funneled fuel from rails to ships, the heart of the invading army's supply chain. Social media lit up with fiery depot images, reports of hubs disrupted along Don and Volga lines. 8 Russian airports halted flights, a clear tremor of fear.
Black plumes from Feodosia blackened the sky, choking the peninsula's war essence into the Black Sea. Tourist signs flipped overnight, no fuel, just exit and wait.
Panic calls echoed along the Feodosia Kerch road, cars idling in eerie silence, exhausting fumes mixing with the sharp tang of diesel.
Kids huddled under blankets, their tiny hands clutching toys, voices hushed about fleeing before winter's bite. Was this the unraveling of a regime built on myths of reclaimed land?
Military logic exposed it, fuel storages ablaze, rails severed, air defenses saturated from multiple fronts, shattering garrison rhythms. Repair teams trapped in secondary strikes, logistics reversing in disarray.
Public instinct fired, bridge, ferry, flee. Kerch Bridge, once a marvel of steel, now a gauntlet of dread. Cargo bans and safety alarms bottled civilians at collapse's edge. Russia scrambled to revive suspended 2020 ferries, emergency crews hauling cranes and plates to patch Kerch Strait's decay. Not hope rebuilt overnight, but survival props. Analyst Andrei Zablotsky sneered at it as crane evacuation drills. Past bridge hits forced splitting loads among scant wagons, rendering garrison supply a mirage. With ferries, could they shuttle only lightly? If troops boarded, it whispered Kremlin retreat. Western intel buzzed, Ukraine's pre-winter storm brewing. Anxiety peaked. Was this Feodosia's spark for targets like Zankoy Junction, Belbek and Saki airports? Crimea's fixed bases, ripe for drone swarms, vulnerability amplified by scattered defenses. Flee they did, Simferopol queues snarled, fuel capped per person, cash hunts amid card glitches, families picnic only with snacks, public rides stalled. Peninsula safe?
Administered promises clashed with exodus whispers. Explosions echoed in minds, images viraling dread. Ukraine's doctrine, honed since 2023, strangled layers, energy, fuel, rails, airfields in unison.
Saki, catcher radars flickered, subswarms exploiting voids. Air defenses S-300, S-400.
Panzer faltered against low-altitude hordes, ammo draining, resupply strained by crippled energy, outdated IR scans missing sly targets. Crimea airshield swish-cheesed, airports grounded to dodge misfires.
So, Putin's bastion exposed?
Strategy demanded fuel regularity, rail viability, airspace security impossible now with burns, disruptions, alerts endless.
Next. Zankoy substations choke point rail bottlenecks. Belbek, Saki runways demand hours per fix, fuel hits deepen voids. Sevastopol nodes, supply bays next in crosshairs as commands scatter generators.
Kerch's railway viaducts targeted, aiming isolated garrisons.
Could Russia hold, or would the crowd's flight unmask surrender?
As the night settled on Crimea, a palpable tension gripped the air, festivities transformed into frantic gestures of escape. The scenic vacation landscapes were suddenly dominated by desperate signs stating, exit, wait, no fuel. By dawn, panic spread like wildfire along the roads from Feodosia to Kerch. Cars, filled with anxious families, formed long lines at fuel stations.
Children huddled in blankets, their faces reflecting uncertainty as they awaited the depot's opening. Whispers of a harsh winter siege echoed through the vehicles, revealing deep fears of an unbearable reality.
The unraveling of what was once an oppressive regime was a consequence of cold military logic. Fuel depots blazed, flames consuming the lifeline of the occupying forces. Railway hubs were being isolated, and military command centers faced an overwhelming barrage from various directions. The intricate web of logistics unraveled, revealing the vulnerabilities of the Russian garrisons. Repair crews, caught off guard, found themselves juggling chaos as the supply lines began to backward unravel, with panic instigating a survival instinct among the locals. The call to escape surged through the populace.
Across the Kerch Bridge, once an engineering marvel, a psychological examination unfolded. Restrictions on heavy vehicles compounded with heightened fears forced civilian traffic to the brink. In an unexpected turn, the Russian authorities hastily revived ferry services, which had been dormant since 2020. Yet, transforming rusted ferry routes into a symbol of salvation would take time. Swift repairs were underway, with cranes and makeshift equipment lining the port sites, but the urgency screamed temporary fix. Ukrainian analyst Andrei Zablotsky narrated the scene, likening it to a rehearsal for mass evacuation. His observations illuminated that any heavy transport to the bridge must now traverse complications, each load split among dwindling resources. The reality was bleak. Crimea's tenuous grip on control was slipping, and tension escalated as millions prepared for what might come next. With the air thick with anticipation and apprehension, one question loomed: would this be the night everything changed? In the face of unfolding chaos, Ukrainian defense analyst Andrei Zablotsky characterized the frantic preparations underway in Crimea as a longer-term evacuation drill. He pointed out the significant damage inflicted on the bridge's railway line, which now required heavy loads to be split among several wagons to move it all. With the prospect of a ferry line potentially reopening, a stark reality emerged: it might predominantly serve to shuttle soldiers and light vehicles, not civilian traffic. The implications were chilling. Should military convoys begin to traverse these waters, it would suggest that the Kremlin was shifting from a staunch defensive posture toward a gradual retreat. This brewing tension heightened as Western intelligence indicated that a more substantial offensive against Crimea was in the works, intended to transpire before winter's arrival. The flames-consuming Feodosia were merely the prelude to a broader upheaval. Key infrastructure, such as the Django railway junction, Belbek and Saki airports, command centers around Sevastopol, and critical bridges in Kerch, hung in the balance. The vast military resources stationed on the peninsula became increasingly exposed, vulnerable to waves of unmanned aerial vehicles that could exploit their weaknesses. Russian air defense systems, which ideally should unify their forces in concentrated locations, were instead strained across various fronts, amplifying these vulnerabilities. Panic set in among the population, transforming once calm routes into sites of chaos. Long lines of vehicles formed on the roads, fuel rations were enforced, and families clashed over the dwindling cash supply when card payments failed. Children huddled in cars, bundled in blankets, as transportation ceased for hours. The realization that Crimea, a once perceived sanctuary, had become a treacherous trap sent waves of anxiety echoing through the overall psyche of the populace. The symptoms of a collective psychological breakdown were apparent. As rumors spread on social media about soldiers potentially receiving priority for ferries, civilians flocked to the bridges in desperation. Checkpoints and security measures led to severe delays, further compounding the urgency. The contrast was stark. While the Russian administration echoed assurances of safety in Crimea, day-to-day realities told a different story: a growing throng at intersections and transport hubs, where people now meticulously plan for fuel and provisions, readying for journeys that seemed to stretch indefinitely. But what if the next attack was aimed at even deeper-rooted structures, targeting the very heart of Crimea's military logistics? As speculation mounted, a chilling question loomed: could the unthinkable total evacuation be coming, and what might it cost if the gates of Crimea were to close forever? The growing unrest signaled something monumental was on the verge of unfolding, and the future of the peninsula hung by a thread. In a tense atmosphere, panic spread as families huddled in cars, blankets wrapped tightly around children, clutching bags of dry food during a standstill of public transport. The once-thought sanctuary of the peninsula was now morphing into a desperate exit route. Fear surged through social media like wildfire, with warnings that soldiers might soon be prioritized for evacuation. Civilians frantically rushed to the Kerch Bridge, their hearts pounding in rhythm to escalating anxiety. Yet the bridge became a choke point. Security measures, previously meant to provide safety, now caused chaos. Secondary routes were blocked, and alerts of incoming threats echoed, creating a cacophony of sirens that cut through the frantic atmosphere. On one side, Russian officials insisted that Crimea remained safe, their messages ringing hollow against the backdrop of growing crowds, each person plotting their escape with only minimal supplies. The images from the previous night's destruction were fresh in their minds, spreading quickly through text and video. Analyzing Ukraine's strategy reveals a meticulous design aimed at crippling Crimea's logistical lifelines. Since 2023, they implemented a doctrine of strangulation, systematically targeting key infrastructure all in one night. While flames engulfed the oil terminal in Feodosia, air defense systems at critical airfields, like Smoky, flickered between operational and dormant. This created exploitable gaps for drone swarms to infiltrate. Amidst this chaos, the disparity between the ostentatious branding of Russian air defenses and their actual effectiveness became glaringly apparent. The S-300 and S-400 systems struggled to adapt to the speed and unpredictability of drone swarms, while short to medium-range defenses, like the Pantsir, buckled under the pressure. As munitions quickly dwindled, the energy supply needed to sustain operations further deteriorated, each setback amplified the uncertainty among the occupying forces. What happens when a powerful military presence crumbles under the weight of logistical failures and public despair? As the flames raged and the sirens wailed, the psychological grip of seeming safety shattered, leaving a critical question: could these moments of chaos pave the way for a significant shift in the power dynamics of Crimea? In a tense scene set against the backdrop of the Crimean peninsula, chaos erupts as the region faces unprecedented turmoil. An ominous whistling pierces the night sky on October 5, followed by a cacophonous series of explosions that ignite a raging inferno. Flames flicker across the landscape as panic sets in. By dawn, sirens wail, marking not just an attack but the unraveling of a delicate order that once held the population at bay. As reports spread of simultaneous strikes targeting vital infrastructure, voices whisper through the streets, "We cannot stay here this winter." The Ukrainian forces unleash over 250 unmanned aerial vehicles and missiles, targeting fuel depots and communication nodes crucial for the occupying forces. When the marine oil terminal in Feodosia goes up in flames, it signals a critical breaking point. The lifeline of supplies to the Russian military is severed. Social media buzzes with images of destruction, igniting a visceral fear that grips every heart. The air thickens with tension as families hurriedly pack their vehicles, waiting hours for fuel at stations where panic reigns. Everyone's thoughts echo the same sentiment: is it worth the risk? Gradually, the Kerch Bridge morphs from a mere architectural wonder into a psychological gauntlet. Will the evacuation be swift enough? Will they escape the tightening noose of military presence? Yet, amidst the frantic movements, the Russian regime scrambles to relaunch ferry routes, aiming to alleviate the chaos at the bridge. Engineers scurry to make repairs, hoping against hope to restore some semblance of order. But Ukrainian defense analysts warn that heavy trucks can barely traverse the dwindling supply chains. The very fabric of military logistics begins to fray, and with it, the resolve of the occupying forces. As darkness cloaks the peninsula again, a new wave of attacks looms on the horizon. The strategic strangulation of Crimea isn't just a tactic, it's a calculated maneuver that could tip the scales in favor of Ukraine. Analysts pinpoint future targets: the Django Railway Junction, a critical site that could spell disaster for any remaining supply lines. With each passing hour, the urgency escalates. The question looms large: what will become of Crimea? The Russian air defenses, stretched thin and struggling to adapt, find themselves overwhelmed, and the realization hits hard: they are losing control. The infrastructure that once held steady is now a fractured echo of desperation. As families continue to flee, the image of escape from Crimea morphs into a vivid reminder of looming peril. Will the day come when the bridges remain forever silent, signaling the end of a tumultuous chapter in this storied land? The story of Crimea hangs in the balance, not just for its inhabitants, but as a chilling narrative that unfolds amid the shadows of history. In a race against time, the residents grapple with their uncertain fate, longing for safety while the pulse of battle echoes in the distance. What will the dawn reveal?
The answer may determine not just the outcome for a region, but the path of nations entwined in conflict.
Amidst the tension gripping the Crimean peninsula, the landscape is about to change forever.
Recently, the quiet was shattered by a sudden, piercing whistle in the night sky, an ominous herald of destruction.
Explosions ripped through the air, illuminating the darkness.
By dawn, the once peaceful morning had turned chaotic, with sirens ringing and flames rising in the distance, a sign that a reckoning was imminent. In the early hours of October 5, Ukraine unleashed a coordinated assault targeting key Russian military infrastructure across Crimea. Over 250 drones and cruise missiles flooded into the region, focusing on energy hubs and logistical arteries pivotal for the occupying forces. Flames consumed the marine oil terminal and refinery complex in Feodosia, paralyzing the lifeblood for military operations. The Ukrainian military's operations were described by officials as a strategic severance, intended to disrupt the supply routes that fuel the invading army.
As the news of destruction circulated, panic set in.
Vacation posters along the southern coast were hastily replaced with warning signs proclaiming, "Exit.
No fuel."
Long lines formed at fuel stations as families filled their vehicles, clutching blankets and emergency supplies, whispering anxiously about the uncertainty of winter. The reality of an unraveling occupation regime was laid bare as the once strong grip of Russian forces weakened under the pressure of targeted strikes.
Russian military analysts noted that the very essence of Crimea's defense was slipping away. Fuel depots blazed, railway nodes were compromised,
and an already strained air defense system was pushed to its limits.
As the sun rose, the anticipation of chaos grew, casting long shadows over the psychological landscape. Families felt their safe haven morph into a place of dread. Could the sturdy Kerch Bridge soon become a lifeline for both soldiers and families, or would it become a choke point for desperate civilians fleeing the gathering storm?
This call to action from the Ukrainian forces was not merely tactical, it was calculated to exploit weaknesses, to destabilize at every turn. The military planners were already predicting the next target zones, railway junctions like Django, vital airports near Belbek and Saki, each representing an Achilles heel in Crimea's fragile defense. These attacks came under the broader doctrine of strategic strangulation, meticulously designed to sever Crimea's lifelines.
Rumblings of escalating tension and the vulnerability of Russian defenses echoed across social media as citizens became aware of their own precarious position. Should they defy the authorities and flee, or cling to the hope of safety amidst the chaos?
As rumors swirled about heavy equipment supplies being vulnerable to airstrikes, anxiety surged. The thought of being trapped was a weight on everyone's shoulders. Next, strategic command nodes, crucial for efficient military operation, became focal points for the Ukrainian forces. These command centers, filled with expensive equipment, could be targeted, exacerbating the panic.
What if Ukraine successfully struck at these lifelines?
The very fate of Crimea seemed to hinge on these critical infrastructures. As Ukrainian forces readied their next moves, all eyes turned to high-voltage transformers around Simferopol and Yevtoria, key assets vulnerable to assault. The cycle of closure and reopening would only complicate resupply efforts, and what started as military precision morphed into a backdrop of widespread despair among civilians. The longer the fires raged, and the more panic spread, the clearer it grew, Crimea was at a breaking point.
Families weighed their options, the flickering glow of hope dimming in the haze of uncertainty. Would they find safety on the other side of the Kerch Bridge, or would that path lead to something far more perilous?
The scenes unfolding were more than mere moments in time, they were reshaping the very essence of Crimea itself, rewriting its narrative in the flames of war. As the reality of the situation settled in, questions loomed over the horizon.
How long could the Russian grip last? What would become of the people caught in the storm?
The answers lay just beyond the reach of daybreak, suspended in the chaos of a world transformed.
The clock was ticking.